The steel frame buggy was climbing the vertical rock face when it flipped backward, rolled once, and landed back on all four wheels. The steel frame buggy passed through the starting gate, accelerated through a turn, then suddenly slammed head-on into a large tree stump beside the track and came to a stop. The lifted gray Jeep charged hard up a dirt mound, launched into the air, then pitched upward and flipped backwards several times before landing back on all four wheels. The red and purple buggy tried to climb the steep slope. The purple steel frame buggy cleared a dirt mound, then lifted its front end and accelerated up the steep, rocky slope. However, just as it reached the top, the vehicle lost balance, rolled over to the right, and ended up upside down in the dirt trench below. The pickup truck was climbing a red dirt ridge in the forest when it lost balance, crashed into a tree, tipped over to the right, and fell into a deep ditch. The red pickup truck blasted over the dirt mound, launched into the air, then landed badly, flipped backward, and ended up upside down in the muddy field. A white pickup truck was drifting in circles across the desert when it suddenly tipped over onto one side. The gray Jeep was climbing a rocky ledge. Just as the driver accelerated to get up it, the front end was thrown high into the air, causing the Jeep to roll over to the right and then fall backward. The dark blue Suzuki descended a slope of white sand, lost balance, and flipped over several times before finally coming to a stop on all four wheels. The green and purple megatruck blasted hard over the dirt mounds, lifted its front end, and pulled off a full backward flip while balancing on its two rear wheels before landing safely to the cheers of the crowd. The steel frame buggy tried to climb through a large rocky gap, but the wheels lost traction, causing it to tip over to the left and get stuck between the rock walls. The white off-road pickup was chasing closely and pulling ahead of the red truck through a corner. But as it blasted over a raised section of the track, the white truck suddenly lost control, launched into the air, tumbled through the dust, and ended up upside down on the race course. The white off-road pickup was speeding through a brush-covered section when it suddenly launched straight into the air, flipped forward, and crashed back down to the ground, kicking up a huge cloud of dust before continuing on and disappearing behind the trees. The gray UTV with the words Booty Patrol on it was trying to climb from the water up a steep rock face, but halfway up the slope, it lost momentum, flipped backward, rolled once, and fell straight back into the water. The brown steel frame buggy was trying to make it over a steep dirt and rock embankment, but halfway up the slope, it lost momentum, the front wheels lifted off the ground, and the vehicle flipped backward down to the bottom of the hill. The blue pickup truck was speeding down the dirt road when the rear end was suddenly kicked upward, causing the front end to slam straight into the ground and send a huge cloud of dust into the air. The blue steel frame buggy was trying to climb a rocky dirt slope in the forest. However, it lost momentum, reared straight up, and flipped backward. The blue and white buggy tried to climb the steep slope, but it lost momentum, flipped backward, rolled once down to the bottom of the hill, and slammed into a tree stump before tipping onto its side. The steel frame buggy tried to climb a steep dirt embankment. However, just as it got close to the top, it lost momentum, slid backward, and rolled over at the bottom of the slope, sending dust everywhere. The blue buggy number 16 tried to charge up the steep slope, but lost momentum, slid backward, and then tumbled several times through the dust before coming to a stop at the bottom of the hill. The blue steel frame buggy accelerated hard up the steep sandy dirt wall, but just before reaching the top, the vehicle flipped backward and tumbled several times all the way down to the bottom of the slope in a huge cloud of dust. The black buggy blasted over the ridge at very high speed and launched high into the air. However, it flipped backward and then tumbled several times across the ground. The gray buggy tried to accelerate up a steep, rocky dirt slope, but just before reaching the top, the vehicle flipped backward, rolled several times down to the bottom of the hill, then slammed into a tree stump and tipped over onto its right side. The white steel frame buggy accelerated hard up the steep, rocky dirt face, but just before reaching the top, it lost balance, flipped backward, and then tumbled several times down the slope below. The black SUV blasted over the ridge at high speed and launched into the air, but after a bad landing, the vehicle rolled over and slammed hard into the road. The buggy raced downhill, lost control, slammed into the dirt bank on the left, then rolled over several times before ending up upside down in a cloud of dust. The red steel frame buggy was trying hard to climb a winding dirt and rock slope in the forest. However, while attempting to get through a steep turn, the vehicle lost balance, pitched up heavily to the right, and then rolled over. The cream-colored buggy was trying to climb a steep, rocky slope in the forest, but just before reaching the top, the two front wheels lost traction and lifted completely off the ground. The vehicle then flipped fully backward, fell down, and ended up overturned on the rocky slope. The white steel frame buggy was trying to accelerate up a rough, rocky slope in the forest, but halfway up the hill, the front wheels lost momentum and lifted off the ground. The buggy immediately flipped backward and overturned into a tree stump. The buggy accelerated hard up a steep dirt embankment, but just before reaching the top, it lost momentum, reared straight up, flipped backward, and rolled once down to the bottom of the slope. The buggy charged hard up the steep, muddy trench, but halfway up the slope, it lost balance, flipped backward, and slid all the way down to the bottom of the hill, ending up upside down. The buggy accelerated hard up the steep dirt slope, But when it reached the top, the front end suddenly shot upward. The vehicle flipped over, rolled once, down to the bottom of the hill, and came to rest, overturned beside a tree stump. The buggy charged hard up the steep, muddy trench, but halfway up the slope it lost balance, flipped backward, and slid all the way down to the bottom of the hill, ending up upside down. The blue car accelerated rapidly down a narrow, muddy ditch. It lost momentum, flipped over, and plunged into a deep hole. Off-road vehicle number 16 accelerated powerfully up the steep sandy and gravel slope, then lost momentum, wobbled, flipped over backwards, and rolled down the hillside. The red buggy accelerated rapidly up the muddy slope, its front end flying into the air at the top, and the vehicle flipped over backward before rolling several times down to the foot of the hill. The blue buggy charged up the steep sand dune at night, but just before reaching the top, it lost momentum, reared straight up, flipped backward, and rolled twice down to the bottom of the slope. The silver and black buggy accelerated hard up the steep, muddy dirt slope, but when it reached the top, the front end shot straight up, the vehicle flipped backward, and then tumbled several times down to the bottom of the hill. The purple buggy accelerated hard up the steep, rocky slope in the forest, but just before reaching the top, it lost momentum, reared straight up, and flipped backward. The black steel frame buggy was accelerating up a narrow dirt trench in the forest, but while turning to get through the sharp bend, it lost momentum and rolled back down to the bottom of the slope. The purple buggy accelerated up the rough, rocky slope, but when the left side wheels climbed onto a high boulder, the vehicle lost balance, tipped to the right, and then rolled repeatedly down into the deep pit hidden behind the bushes in a thick cloud of dust. The beige buggy accelerated up the rough, rocky trench in the forest. As it tried to climb over a high rock ledge, the vehicle reared up, flipped backward, and rolled over once. Back well. The black buggy charged up a high dirt mound, was launched into the air, then flipped hard and landed upside down. The blue steel frame buggy tried to get over the rough, rocky pit, but it lost momentum, flipped backward, and ended up lying across the trail in the middle of the forest. The white steel frame buggy accelerated hard up the steep, rocky dirt slope, but while trying to push past the tree roots near the top, it lost momentum, slid backward, and rolled over once back down to the bottom of the hill. The black buggy charged up a very tall and steep dirt slope, but near the top it lost momentum, flipped backward, and tumbled several times all the way back down to the bottom of the hill.
Over there. Oh, goodness.
The green off-road buggy accelerated hard up the rough, rocky dirt slope, but as soon as it climbed onto the incline, the vehicle lost balance, flipped backward, and rolled several times back down to the bottom of the slope. The white off-road buggy accelerated up a narrow, steep, rock-filled trail in the forest, but while trying to climb over the steep rock ledge ahead, the front end was suddenly thrown upward, causing the vehicle to flip completely backward, tumble down the slope, and end up upside down. A red steel frame buggy accelerated up a tall dirt embankment. The off-road buggy accelerated hard up a steep, rocky dirt slope, but near the top it lost momentum, flipped backward, and then tumbled several times all the way back down to the bottom of the hill before ending up upside down. The orange buggy took a turn and then accelerated up the dirt slope in the forest. As it tried to climb over a high rock ledge, the vehicle suddenly reared straight up and flipped backward, coming to rest against a tree trunk. The silver buggy charged up the muddy slope, but after crossing the dirt ledge it lost balance, reared up, flipped backward, and ended up upside down. The red buggy charged up the tall dirt mound, was launched into the air, and then flipped backward onto its roof. The blue buggy was climbing a steep rocky dirt slope. It lost momentum, flipped backward, rolled once in midair, and landed back on all four wheels at the bottom of the hill. The pink buggy charged up the steep dirt embankment, but it lost momentum. The front end lifted the vehicle, flipped backward, rolled once down to the bottom of the slope, and ended up upside down. The buggy charged up the dirt slope covered with large rocks. The front end lifted twice in a row as it tried to get over the obstacle. On the second attempt, the vehicle completely lost balance, flipped backward, and rolled down into the steep trench. The black buggy charged up the rough, steep rock face, but as it tried to get over a high rock ledge, the two front wheels were thrown into the air, causing the vehicle to rear up and flip completely backward. The buggy charged up the rocky dirt slope, but as it tried to push over the rock ledge, the front end was thrown upward, causing the vehicle to flip backward tip onto its side and end up stuck on the hillside upside down. The buggy charged up a steep, rocky dirt slope, but just before reaching the top, the front end shot straight up. The vehicle flipped backward and then rolled twice back down the slope. The black buggy cleared the first rock step smoothly, but when it charged up the steep rock face ahead, it suddenly reared up, flipped backward, and ended up upside down on the slope. The buggy, with foreplay written on it, charged up a steep rocky dirt slope. But just before reaching the top, the front end suddenly shot straight up into the air, and the vehicle flipped backward before coming down upside down on the sandy slope below. The steel frame buggy charged up a steep, rocky dirt slope through a cloud of dust. But just before reaching the top, it lost momentum, reared up, flipped backward, and rolled straight back down to the bottom of the hill. The gray buggy charged up the vertical dirt embankment, but it suddenly reared up. The gray and black steel frame buggy charged up a small dirt ledge, but it lost momentum, causing the front end to shoot straight up before the vehicle fell backward and flipped upside down into the muddy pit below. The white steel frame buggy charged up a steep, rough trail in the forest covered with dry leaves, but when it reached the steeper section higher up, it lost momentum, flipped backward, and ended up upside down on the trail.